How are you, Ben?
I'm good, Tom. Why do you ask, Tom?
You look tired.
I am tired. I have a headache.
Why?
I don't know. I think I need coffee.
Have some coffee.
There's some in this red Solo cup.
Yeah?
There is.
Is it watered down?
It is. That way I can chug it like an alcoholic.
That was good.
All right.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
And we have a gentleman here to my left, possibly your right. He goes by the name of Frank. I don't know if you want me to say your last name.
Yeah, you could say it.
Frank Marino.
How you doing, guys?
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever podcast player you choose. That could be Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music. We're on all of them. And thank you for watching on YouTube. If, in fact, you get value out of any of this, please take a minute to share it with somebody. And ultimately, if you want, you can reach out to either myself or Ben. You can email us, Tom at realrecoverytalk.com and Ben at realrecoverytalk.com. Right, Ben?
Yes, sir.
Cool.
Can I say something real quick, Tom?
Sure.
All right. I just want to take a second. Kind of hard to find the words. But if you all are regular listeners, you probably heard episode 249 with Billy G. Just want to throw it out there that last Thursday, his wife got in a fatal car accident. And, you know, throwing it out there so that prayers can go out. But also I want to kind of make the point that it's really amazing, if you've listened to Billy's story, how you know where he was, where he is today in his sobriety, how many lives him and his wife have touched in a positive manner, the amount of outpour and support that came for his family. They have a 3-year-old daughter, Shar, is absolutely amazing. And I just want to say, you know, related to this, to recovery, it's a testament to what can happen and the amount of people and lives you can touch. Like they did a GoFundMe for him, and hundreds and hundreds of people donated. It was actually in the news, the local news down here. But you know, not that money will fix it, but you know, Billy actually put out a post on his Instagram this morning. He said, you know, I was avoiding talking about this, but he's mentioned in particular he was so touched by the number of people.
Yeah, I remember him saying it's not so much about the dollar amount, it's the amount of people that he, I mean, I don't even know if he knows how many, you know, all the people that donated, you know, and obviously some people donate, keep it anonymous and stuff like that. But
yeah, so his wife's name was Samantha, and, you know, there's Billy and their 3-year-old daughter, Shar, so maybe you could put some prayers out there for him. That was episode 249. Yeah,
the one thing that I want to just say on that is how quick something like your life can be flipped upside down. And it was, you know, one day everything's great, and the next day, you know, you're just thrown for this loop. And these are the things that we talk about when we get sober. You know, when, you know, life on life's terms, you know, you just can't predict it. Sometimes, you know, we wish we could have a crystal ball and, you know what's coming down the pipe, but we don't. And, you know, I think, you know, from an outsider looking in, as far as Billy goes, you know, it's a true testament to his recovery, his sobriety, you know, what he's done for himself over the past, I think, 7 years he's been clean now, and where he's at versus how he would have handled it back in the day. And I do think it's worth mentioning that those two were together when Billy was in active addiction, you know, so this wasn't something that, you know, they were with each other when Billy was the worst of the worst, you know.
10 years, yeah.
Yeah, so Billy, whatever, man, if you're listening, you know, hats off to you. You know, obviously everybody's been praying for you, and you're getting through it as best you can, I suppose. And yeah, if you want to donate to this GoFundMe, I mean, you can email Ben and I, and we'll gladly share the link. And, you know, yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Did you know Billy?
I don't think so, no.
No?
No, but it's a sad story.
Yeah. All right. So we got Frank here, and Frank volunteered his time to come on and speak to us and speak to all of you about him. And, well, let's just start off by saying Frank does NA.
NA. Narcotics Anonymous.
Narcotics Anonymous. And if you've been listening for any length of time, you know Ben and I are staunch AA guys. So it'll be an interesting conversation. Honestly, just to put it out there, though, I've been to 2 NA meetings my whole entire life. So I don't know.
Same. I think I've been to 2 AA meetings.
Yeah. So, you know, but I do think
maybe a little bit more, but
it could be interesting to draw some of the distinctions between the two. But let's just start off, Frank. I want you to just go back a little bit. I know you said you're from New York. And also, I have a hellacious cough. So if you hear me coughing throughout this episode, apologize in advance. Frank.
Yeah.
Let's go back. Take us New York, man.
Yeah, man. So, you know, I grew up in New York, and I come from a pretty much an immigrant family. My mother and father are both from another country. My mother came here when she was 8. My father came here when he was in his 20s. Very humble, you know, didn't speak English, you know, and just made their way, you know, and they met, you know, and they got married, and here I am. You know, so, but, you know, it was a little bit different growing up because, you know, like I was always embarrassed by the fact that they didn't speak, my father didn't speak really good English. My mother did because she was here for a long time, but my father always had an accent, you know what I mean? And it was kind of embarrassing, but the crazy thing about it was I felt that way. The crazy thing about the whole neighborhood I lived in was like that, you know what I mean? But I didn't think that anybody else, you know, I always felt like, I was the only one, right? Like I was the only one that had this whole thing going on, and that, you know, it was embarrassing to me, you know. They named my sister this crazy name, you know, like, I'm Frank, that's easy. My sister's name is Adwa. It's a family name from Italy, you know what I mean? And I was embarrassed by that, you know what I mean? And I just didn't know if I fit in, I just never knew where I fit, you know. So it was weird growing up. And, you know, like, I grew up in an area where I watched guys on the corner hanging out, and that's who I wanted to be. You know what I mean? And so, like, I would act a certain way at home. I would act a certain way when I was, like, out on the street. And this is as a kid. I would act a certain way in school. I would out, you know, and what do we call that? We wear a ton of masks, right? And that's how I was growing up. That was basically my childhood.
Like the chameleon.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Ben talks a lot about that, too.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's exhausting, you know?
When did the substances really enter into
Not until later on, man. I was always too scared. Yeah, I was always too scared. You know, I drank beer and I smoked weed like every other kid growing up, you know, 12, 13, 14 years old. Didn't like it. You know what I mean? Didn't like the way it made me feel. You know, I remember the first time we drank beer back then. I'm going to age myself a little bit. They used to have the pull-off cans, you know, tops.
Yeah.
And that's how we got caught. We left all the pull-off things on the floor. You know what I mean? And, you know, had 2 beers. We were like bouncing, like just me and my cousin, we shit-faced, you know what I mean? But we got caught with those little so I always had consequences, right? With that, like right away, it was like I never was able to do anything. So I said, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore, you know? And it was that's how it was for me. I didn't start probably using drugs until my late teens, early 20s.
So I've been to New York a couple of times, and it seems like, so you grew, when did you move out of New York? How old were you?
So the first time I moved out of New York, I was 26. I had never been anywhere. And I came to Florida to go to treatment.
Really?
Yeah.
So that had to have been kind of a culture shock.
The only thing I knew about Florida was Cops.
Cops?
Oh,
the
Cops.
TV show.
Yeah. So I came here ready to knuckle up. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't know. I ended up in Delray Beach at DAF. Oh, and I was like, well, hold on a second. This is not what you know what I mean? Like, this is not Overtown. You know what I mean? Where they film cops. This is not bad here. You know. So
when you were in New York, though, and, you know, you started getting involved in substances and stuff like that, I guess my impression of New York, it's go, 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 go all the time, you know, and like nobody really talks to anybody. Now, I don't know if it was this way 30 years ago when you were there, however long ago that was, but how did that play into your substance abuse? Was it like, you know, you developed your friends, and was your friendships and the bonds that you had really around substance use? Were you involved in any sports? Did you have any healthy things?
Yes.
Or was it?
So that's the thing. So like I didn't when I started using, I broke away from all my friends I grew up with because they never really did that stuff. You know what I mean? And so I made a whole new bunch of friends. You know what I mean? The guys that I hung out with growing up, they were into sports. They were into like work. Like, you know, some of them had businesses. Their dad had businesses, so they would work. My dad had a business. Like, you know, we had pizzerias and delis, you know, and you know, so a lot of times I would have to break away from those guys and go with the other crew to go get high, you know. But before all that, like, I mean, like I said, I didn't really do much. And, you know, I remember, when I first started using, and this is always, you know, like, I think about this because I was 18 years old, right? And I probably was into doing my DOC probably for 6 months, and it was completely out of control. I was like, you know, it was one of those things where I reflect back to when I was a kid. I didn't eat one piece of gum. You know what I'm saying? I ate a whole pack. I would chew it, spit it out, and like give me more. And I was always like that. So I didn't realize that growing up. Like I'd always thought, you know, like, oh, I just like the way that tastes, or I just like the way that, you know, but it was the feeling that I got. I wanted more always.
You said earlier, you know, you had a couple beers with your cousins, stuff along those lines. You just mentioned DOC, drug of choice.
Yeah.
What's your drug of choice? Did you jump right into that? Like, what'd that look like?
You know, it changed with the times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could smoke the hell out of crack. I love heroin. I love pills. I love anything that, you know, mood altering.
How did crack and heroin and all that come along?
So New York in the late 80s, that's what the drug of choice was. You know what I mean? And, you know, like, I just, you know, I started with powder, obviously. Right. And, you know, going to clubs and hitting the powder. And then, you know, the powder became too much. So it was a lot easier to smoke. And then once I did that the first time in 6 months, it brought me to my knees, you know.
And you were how old then?
I was probably around 18, 19.
Okay. And then you ended up in Florida at 26 years old?
Well, I went to treatment one time before that.
Up in New York.
Yeah, I went to a Therapeutic Community.
What is that?
So Therapeutic Community is an 18-month program. It's in upstate New York. Well, I spent 30 days in Far Rockaway. And then I went up to upstate New York. And basically it's, you know, like they shave your head. You know what I mean? It's sweep the sun off the floor for 6 hours a day. You know,
sweep the sun off the floor.
Yes.
Like what's that? What's that? Like
exactly.
You're just sweeping.
Means nothing. Yeah. Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. You know, like
this is really rehabilitating. It sounds like.
And they keep you there for 18 months, and you know, I was there probably. I was able to manipulate. I was the youngest person out of 163 people in this house. I was 19 years old probably, and the women scared the shit out of me. They all were siphoned through Rikers Island. You know what I mean? So they would come out of Rikers and then go through Daytop and then come into my house. And like, it was scary for me. You know what I mean? I had never seen any of this stuff before. And people screaming at you, at your face. They tell you to step back, and they give you a verbal haircut is what they call it. And they would just start screaming at you.
Who told you to go there? Were you forced there?
What happened was I had a problem. My family didn't know how to deal with it. So they reached out to somebody. And this somebody was a major contributor to this detox program in New York. Mm-hmm. That's been around since the 60s. You know, back in the day, they used to give heroin addict drinking passes, you know, to go out and drink, and then they would come back. So it was a little bit weird, but like when I got there, that all stopped. But it was a tough, you know, people screaming at you. My initial interview, I remember I sat on a chair for about 6 hours in the lobby of this hotel, is what they owned, right? There was nobody around. They made me carry my chair into a room with 5 guys sitting up against the wall. You know, no furniture in the room. I sat my chair in the middle, and they started asking me questions. And as they went down the line, got to the last guy, and this is what the guy said to me. He goes, "Do you know that you're a piece of shit and that your mother cries for you every night? Get on your knees and beg me you want to stay here." And then they start coming at you one at a time, boom, boom, and they start yelling and screaming at you and telling you this and telling you that, and then your family this and you this, and you're crying and snotting, and then finally, after about an hour of that, they make you stand up and they give you a hug and they welcome you into the program, and that's when it begins, the craziness of it all.
What year was this?
It's like 88, 89.
Wow, treatment's changed.
A little bit. A little bit, I'd say. You know, and it was like, listen, you don't want to be here. There's the door. Somebody's going to take your bet. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I even remember back then they would give you 2 cartons of cigarettes a week. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
name
pretty
brand,
cool.
too.
Marlboro?
Yes.
Marlboro guy?
Marlboro, yeah, man. But I was there probably for, there was a lot of groups. There was a lot of, we called them pull-ups that they would put on the board and say, you know, who's the person that left a piece of paper on the floor in the day room? You know what I mean? And then, you know, everybody would comment on it. I was there probably for 8 months, and it literally took me a bus ride and 2 train stops to get high when I got out. When I left.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
How long did it take after you got out of there?
Yeah, because I didn't learn anything. I didn't learn how to change anything. It was just more like, you know, I learned how to spit razors out of my mouth. You know,
You learned how to what?
spit razors out of my mouth. That's what I learned that.
What does that mean?
Yeah, you put razor blades up here, and then you put them on your tongue and spin them right onto your hand, so you could sneak them in the clubs and stuff.
But why would you want to sneak a razor blade into a club?
In case you have a beef.
Whoa.
Yeah.
All right.
So like this is the stuff I learned there from the people from Rikers Island. You know what I mean? So I didn't learn how to change. I didn't learn how nothing really changed. You know, and so literally I took the bus to the train, 2 train stops, got off, cops, got high. You know, and I thought I was hiding it from everybody.
It's a good example of why, you know, you didn't use any substances for 8 months.
Yeah.
You can take away the substance, you could take away all that stuff, but if there's not some sort of internal change, then, you know, it's 2 train stops and a bus stop later, and
100%.
And you're back smoking crack and doing whatever.
Yeah, 100%. And it was off to the races again. But this time, I thought I was hiding it pretty well. You know what I mean? I didn't think anybody knew. What I come to find out is I can't hide it from. They know.
Yeah.
When I'm fucked up. It's in the way I act, the way I talk, the way my body moves. They know. They just know. And I thought I was fooling everybody. I wasn't fooling nobody, you know.
So you got down to Florida and you went to DAF in Delray. What was that like?
It was cool, man. I mean, comparatively, you know, I got there thinking, you know, cops. That's all I knew. And then I remember Ruben the Cuban gave me a giant hug when I got there. And I was like, oh, this is like nice. And I spent 60 days there.
Ruben the Cuban.
Yeah, that's what they called him. And, you know, and that was the first time I was ever turned on to Narcotics Anonymous. I had never knew up in New York about the programs. I didn't know anything about them. You know what I mean? I just went to Daytop and I thought, okay, that's all there is. I didn't know there was AA or NA or CA or any of these other things. I just thought that was it. And when I got here, you know, they would bring H&I in. We call it H&I. What do you guys call it?
Same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
It stands for hospitals and institutions.
Yeah.
So they bring 12-step meetings into treatment centers.
Yeah.
And just for the listeners, DAF is Drug Abuse Foundation. That's a state-funded program in Delray Beach, Florida.
That's right. Yeah.
So
yeah. And so yeah, I ended up there, and you know, it's funny. They would Sunday night they would bring an NA meeting in, and I sat all the way in the back, you know. And then every week I would move up a couple rows because I would hear these people talk like I talked. You know what I mean? And I would see that, you know, they would understand the things that they were saying. And then, you know, like they say, somebody's going to tell you a story.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 3 rows up, and this guy literally came in and told my story. And it's funny because I was so selfish and self-centered at the time. And I walked up to him after the meeting. I'm like, oh, when did you talk to my therapist? I thought he was there for me. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I go, you just told my story. She must have told you about, you know, how I grew up. That's what I thought. You know what I mean? I really thought that. And he's like, dude, you're crazy. Listen, sit down for a second. And he took a moment and, you know, explained to me that everybody's got a story. And sometimes the similarities, that we have to look at the similarities, not the differences. And you're doing that. So that's a good thing. You know what I mean? I still didn't believe him. You know what I mean? I still didn't believe him.
It's a setup.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I was raised. Don't trust anybody. You know, everybody's out for something, you know.
I think it's important for people when they first get sober, whether it's the first time, the 5th time, the 10th time, to be able to identify with other people. And it's funny that you say that because, you know, I remember the first meetings I would go to and stuff like that and hear people share their story. And I'm like, what? This is literally me.
Right.
you know, and then got the big book, and in the back of the book, there's all these stories about, you know, people. And the thing that I found most interesting was, you know, these stories date back to, what's the earliest stories in the big book? In the 1940s?
Probably 1920s is like when people's drinking took place.
Yeah. I identified with it. 100 years earlier, you know? And that was something for me that I'm like, that was a switch that was flipped for me, because see, in the very beginning stages of this, I just, you know, I removed the alcohol and that was it. And I didn't really buy into the whole I'm an alcoholic thing. I just thought, you know, hey, I'm 26 years old, you know, I drank too much, whatever, I'll put it down for a period of time. But then I start hearing these stories, reading these stories, and these people are alcoholics. And I'm like, dang, I am. Like, I legit am. And that was super important for me, because if I didn't have that, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have a reference point, you know? So it's interesting that you say that.
You know, absolutely. And I think that's the key, right? I mean, a lot of the times is that, you know, when you relate to somebody, I mean, that's what keeps you, you know, kind of like interested in what's going on. You know, the whole buy-in thing is a big thing too. You got to buy into the program and that it works. And you have the proof all around you. You know what I mean? But I never saw any of this. So like once I got out of DAF, I started hitting NA meetings, right? But the difference, because I still didn't know, right? And I didn't buy in 100%. And I could see people working in people's lives, but I would look at the steps on the wall, and I'm sure we've all done this. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. You know, and then this was in my head, and I'd be watching this, and, you know, and everybody's sharing that it works for them, and it works for them, and it works for them. And I'd be like, no, that's not going to work for me. You know what I mean? I was raised different. You know what I mean? And so I would show up to an 8:30 meeting at 8:25 and leave at 9:25 and not talk to anybody, not see anybody. You know, I would go sit in the back, listen, leave, right? And for a year I did that, you know, and because I'm stubborn, and, you know, I stayed abstinent probably. I stopped going to meetings, like, because, you know, I was like, I got this.
My sponsor used to say to me, if you want to get something out of a meeting, you better bring something to it.
Right. Exactly right. 100%.
And then he proceeded to call me an AA thief.
Right. Yeah. I've had some my when I got clean this last time, I've had some words said to me that I was like, oh, you know, but yeah, no. And then, you know, like I was like, I got this. I could do this. I don't need to come here anymore. You know what I mean? And so I did. I went on my way, and I was the addict that wasn't changing, that was abstinent, that was crazier than ever.
How long were you abstinent?
About 8 years.
How long?
8 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you mean by crazier than ever?
So like I had not changed.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the same thoughts I had when I was using, and I didn't trust anybody. I didn't, you know, like everything was like it was before, just without using drugs. You know what I mean? So I was that, you know, the addict without the drugs, and that's a crazy person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The thought process, and, you know, and you know, I looked good on the outside. I was making money. I had I found a wife. I bought the house and the white picket fence, and we were going to have 2.2 kids. You know, the whole thing. It was all there. It's what I thought society wanted from me. And I would wake up every morning and be fucking miserable. I would be completely miserable. I would look at her and be like, ugh, you know what I mean? And no matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of that. Do you know that what I'm saying? Like that hole, that void.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get rid of it. It wouldn't go away. So how did it come out? It came out in all different ways. It came out in the way I treated her. It came out in the way I treated my family. It came out the way I did things. I was always looking for the next thing that made me feel good, right? Whether it was a car or these things that I thought I could hold on to, and none of it worked. None of it worked. And then, you know, obviously she finally left, you know, and then my mother got sick at the same time. She got breast cancer, and, you know, I was like, that's when I picked up again. I was like, I can't.
When was that?
Probably, let's see, I got clean 90, I got 2009, probably 2005, 6, 7, right around there. I don't know exactly when. It was probably right in there.
Did you just like fall off the deep end right away?
Conscious decision.
Did you have a couple
Nope.
drinks and it led to more?
Went right to pills. A conscious decision. I didn't want to feel what I was feeling anymore, and I needed to do something to get rid of that feeling.
What'd you relapse on?
Roxy Cotton.
The Roxys?
Yeah.
The blues?
Yeah. Like I said, whenever was in it at the moment, somebody handed me one day and they're like, oh, you can try this, and I'm like, oh, all right, and I was off to the races, and that lasted probably about 3 years like that. And I completely, I'm talking destroyed, creeping into my parents' house. You know what I mean? On my hands and knees, going in their bedroom, stealing their wedding rings. Doing shit like that. Doing shit that I wouldn't do to people out there. I would do to people who love me the most. You know what I mean? And it was devastating. And what I would say to them, because they would obviously find out, they're like, you took the wedding rings. I'm like, no, I didn't. When you find them, I'll be expecting an apology from you there. Like this, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's fucked up, right?
That is.
Yeah. Yeah, it got to that point because, I had money when I started. I had stuff. But that lasted, that goes fast,
Right.
So now I was an addict on the street.
I got to say, just throw this in there. We were talking about the AA-NA thing earlier. That's the difference between us. Someone in AA will steal your wallet. They say someone in NA will steal your wallet and help you look for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's truth. Absolute truth, man.
So you're coming up on, you have 14 years?
Coming up on 14, July 7th.
July 7th, you'll celebrate 14 years. So when did you referenced buy in 14 years ago, you really bought in.
Here's what happened. Like? As they say in NA, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, right? Here's what happened. It was a specific thing that happened. Wasn't that I was like, didn't have a God moment. Well, maybe I did. I shouldn't say that because here's what happened. I was told not to come back to my mother's house. Nobody wanted to see me. You know what I mean? I got to that point. And now I had progressed from eating pills and snorting pills to shooting pills and shooting heroin. So I had track marks everywhere, and I was just to the animalistic level, we say in AA, right? That's where I was. It was like, that's all it was. That's what my day was about. Waking up, trying to figure out how to get high, getting high, then trying to figure out how to get high again, then getting high, then trying to figure out how to get high again. You know what I mean? That was it. That was my life. Got fired from 100 jobs. I left. I worked for an Italian market over on Glades, and I left. They fired me because, of course, I couldn't function. I left with a prosciutto under my arm. You know what I mean? Yeah, and like somebody stopped me, right? You know what I mean? It was like that, and so it was a Sunday. I guess they were feeling bad for me, and they asked me to come over for dinner. And I kind of make a joke of this, but it was very, very sad, right? I got there. I had dinner. I laid on the couch. I sat up. I nodded out. I woke up, and they were all standing there. My mother, my sisters, my brother-in-law, my father, the kids, they were all standing there. And I make a joke out of it. They did an Italian intervention. They all started screaming at me at once, like, we're going to kill you. If blah, 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 blah. And because I'm a coward when I ran. I ran from the people who were trying to help me. Even though they came across that way, I knew what they were trying to do. And I went back 3 days later, and it was me, my mother, my father in the kitchen. And my mother was bald from the chemo. She had breast cancer, right? And my father is the toughest guy I know. Just broken, just standing there, just doesn't even have a word to say, And that's what my mother said to me. She's like, it still chokes me up to today because I can still feel it. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the reasons why I stay clean still, because of her look, the face that she made looking at my father. And my mother said to me, we've accepted the fact that you're a junkie and you can't come around here no more. Your sisters don't want to see you. And if you love your son, you'll stay away from him too. What I didn't know is my sisters were preparing my mother and father for my death. They kept telling me, he's going to die. And you guys have to be ready for this. He's not going to make it. And I don't know, a switch flipped that day. When my mother said that to me, I'm the firstborn in this country. That means something in my family. You know what I mean? I was supposed to be this senator or president or, and I make a joke when I'm sharing at a meeting. I'm like, and I'm sitting here with you guys today and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. You know what I mean? And so something happened inside, man. And then one other thing happened. My father said he'll take me to Carp. And on the way there, he's like, do me a favor. If you don't do it this time, take a gun, stick it in your mouth, and blow your brains out because your mother can't take this anymore. You're going to kill her. And I'd rather see you go than her. Yeah. That's the damage that I did.
So when you heard that, was that like in Carp parking lot?
Yeah, right there. You know that spot where they drop people off?
Ben does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carp is the first detox I ever went to. There's this big steel door. You used to bang on it. There was this little bench, little camera, phone thing, speaker box, and they're like, no beds, and they tell you to sit on the bench, which, walk to the gas station, grab a tall boy, a little crack, pass out on the bench. So someone opens that door, you run in.
Well, here's what happened. I got there, and Miss Tiffany had been there a couple months before, and Miss Tiffany, the nurse, popped her head out and saw me, and there was a bunch of people there, and she stuck her finger out and pointed at me and goes, come here. And I went right in. I was there 15 minutes.
Wow.
Unheard of. Within the hour, the doc just happened to be there. Within the hour, I had a hospital gown and getting medication. It's unheard of.
You were VIP.
God intervened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You were talking about what your dad said to you in the parking lot. You better do it this time. Because I hear this a lot, and addicts and alcoholics, we don't realize, we think we're only doing it to ourselves when we're in it.
Yeah.
Was that your perspective at the time until you heard that, or were you kind of aware?
No, because I used to say all the time, why does this bother you? I'm only ruining my own life.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you care? But I didn't realize that, you drop a stone in the water and the ripple effect, that's who it affects when you use. I also didn't realize like I was a hurricane coming through everybody's life and just tearing shit up and then just going on my way, not even looking back. I didn't know that I was doing this to everybody. I felt it at times, but I chose to ignore it. I chose to be that selfish, self-centered addict that didn't give a shit about everybody else's feelings, just my next one. You know what I mean? Because I didn't want to, and it sounds like I didn't want to feel the feelings I were feeling. Poor me. You know what I mean? This is what I did. And then that's where my journey really started there. When I walked into that day, I don't even know, it was like, it might've been right around the 4th. I picked the 7th because I was off all medications by then. And it was brutal. It was brutal. I was sick for a long time, man. The 80 milligrams of methadone, the heroin, the pills, whatever I could get into my system. I was sick for a long time. Like, I didn't sleep for weeks. I was sick. My stomach, I stood with a hoodie on in the day room. I stole this, Miami Hurricanes hoodie, and you could literally peel it off me. You know what I mean? But, then I started feeling better. And then I remember my parents came to visit, and, it's like they walk in and now I'm there like 35 days. I got a visit. They come in and I'm like, why are you here? Why are you here? Why would you come and see me? I've destroyed your life. I've literally turned everything upside down. And my mother reached out and she grabbed my face like this. She did the little tap on the cheek and she goes, as long as you're trying, I'll never give up on you.
Mm.
Yeah.
When you heard that, what was that?
Immediately tears started rolling down my face because I'm like, how could I do this to these people? And then them still believe in me enough that I'm going to disappoint you. I know I am. That was in my head at the time because I didn't know if I could do this. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if I wanted to get clean. I didn't know if I wanted to continue to get high. I didn't know. It was too soon. All I know is I didn't want them to feel that anymore. And I held on to that. You know what I mean? That's what I held on to.
How long were you at DAF?
I was there. They had to drag me out of that place, kicking and screaming, man, like a leather. I did. So I went to RTC. I was there for 65 days. Then I went to there halfway. And I was there for, I think, 3 months, 90 days. And I was literally holding on to the door jams while they were kicking me out. Like, I didn't want to go.
You meant Carp?
Oh, I meant Carp, yeah. What I said, DAF.
Yeah. That was Carp, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, kind of same thing.
How long were you there in total then?
I think probably close to 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I went to another halfway after that in Lake Worth.
How long in total were you in some sort of transitional living, like from
1 year
detox up till a year?
Yeah, and then I moved out with a friend. He got high and I went back to halfway.
Okay.
Yeah.
For how long again?
Another 3 months. And then I moved in with another friend, and that's when I was, and at that point, I already started going to meetings. I had a spot. It's funny how I've got my sponsor, but I was starting to work some steps. I started feeling better. I was with a good group of guys. Everything I did was NA related, whether it was play volleyball or go to meetings or all the people. It was all recovery based, right? I didn't do anything without people in recovery, but I got a sponsor. And I didn't want a sponsor because I looked at those steps again and they scared the shit out of me because I had to get real. Right. And I still wasn't ready to get fucking real. And I used to go to this meeting on Wednesday night in the meeting place, 6:30. And it was these crazy women, 28 years, 7 years, 10 years, 4 years, 1 year, all these women in this group. And every week I would come in and they say, "Do you have a sponsor?" And I'm like, "No, I'm good. I got this." You know what I mean? And then I would go back the next week and the next week and the same thing every week. Probably after like 5 or 6 weeks, they're like, I walk in, they all have this shit-eating grin on their face. And I'm like, what? Because I started to get to know people and, people cared about me. And I still wasn't sure how to care about people or show up for people at that point yet. But I'm like, "What's up, guys?" They're like, "Do you have a sponsor?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Well, good, because we picked one for you." And I was like, fuck. And they pushed me over to this guy, and I literally put my head down and said, "Will you be my sponsor?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now I got the sponsor.
I want to point out a couple things that I heard for our listeners, anybody that might be new in recovery. There's a couple things that I heard that I believe made up a formula to success. You just said you showed up to the same meeting over and over. Those people got to know you. Then they started looking out for you. And I don't know how, like NA specifically, because I hear this in AA, but it's actually, the truth is, if you read the literature in AA, it's the sponsor's job to find the sponsee. So in my opinion, that's how it kind of should be. I understand why nowadays there's so many people that need help. Like there's not enough sponsors, in Palm Beach County at least, because there's so many treatment centers. But the other thing too is I want to point out, going back to, again, what your dad said to you in the parking lot, it sounds like you heard some truth. And here's the thing about this process is that there's a line in the big book that says frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. Like, dude, I got to be hit with a sack of bricks, and it's going to hurt. The truth hurts. But it sounds like that was a pivotal moment for you, something you need to hear. But that moment, in my experience, will only get you so far. Right. And then getting a sponsor, going through steps, if you look at step work in particular, like we do a fearless moral inventory, that's step 4. If you look up the word moral in the dictionary, one of the definitions of moral is truth. We have to keep looking at the truth. We have to keep having these eye-opening discussions about ourselves. They need to be pointed out so that we can keep having those pivotal moments like you did in the parking lot with your dad over and over and over again, and that's what gradually gets us better. You can't just have like one moment that got you into detox and then just hope that sticks with you forever.
Don't work.
We got to continue doing work.
Yeah. Well, so now in my journey, now I have a sponsor by name. I'm still scared of those steps. I don't know why they scared me so much. Looking back on it now, I don't know why they scared me so much. I know now I have to get honest with who I really was. You know what I mean? And so I had the sponsor. I lived in the halfway. I had a job. I was doing all the things that, I was supposed to do, right? But I wasn't ready to work steps. And then what happens is, obviously, like everybody knows, you start getting that feeling again. So now you're clean again, and now you're miserable. And I'll never forget, I walked into volleyball on a Saturday morning, and my sponsor was one of the guys that played. He's like, "Oh, you're ready." He saw it. It was written all over my face. Like I was ready to go get high. But instead, he said, "You're ready to start working some steps." So that's when I started, and I was so scared of it. I was so scared of 4 and 5, and I was so scared of 6 and 7. And I wasn't scared of 6 or 7. I was scared after he handed me my character defect list. You know what I mean? I was like, fuck, I thought I had 1 or 2. You know what I mean? And 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 then like I took a long time. We take our time in NA. We really do. I mean, some people don't. I did.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It took me a long time to go through the steps.
How long did it take you?
Oh God,
a year?
Oh, more.
2,
3, 4.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Like I would stop. It took me 18 months just to do my 4th step. So I opened that. Yeah, I don't recommend it. I opened that can of disgusting worms and left it open, festering. And I felt every single bit of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the funny thing about it is I didn't get what anybody was saying when they would talk about the steps.
Yeah.
And then it started clicking, right? Like you start going to meetings and you start doing the work and then you start hearing people share. And I remember calling my sponsor and be like, oh, she had about 3rd step. It was great. And I'm like, he's like, oh, you got something out of it? And I'd be like, yeah. And you go, and hang up the phone. I was like, that's good. You know what I mean? But, it starts clicking, I didn't know anything. And then, this stuff started working. I started seeing it work in my life, and then the little changes start coming. You know what I mean? The little changes. And, God, I think about the person I was when I walked through the doors of Carp then and the person I am today. I was easily insulted back then. Easily. You could, I let so much shit fly the other day. I was driving on Glades Road. So funny. This is not me at all. And I don't know what happened. But the interchange on 95 where they did all that work?
Yeah. Glades is terrible.
Terrible. Yeah. So I'm driving down and I must have cut somebody off. This guy's laying on his horn, like just laying. And he pulls up next to me and I look over and he's doing the hand things, screaming at me. And I roll down my window and he rolls down and I'm like, shit, man, sorry. Did I cut you off? And he's like, I almost fucking hit you. What the fuck's wrong with that guy screaming? I'm like, buddy, we're all going to make it through another day. And you know what he said to me? He goes, I don't know why I get so angry. And we made like eye contact, smiled at each other, and just took off. Like, that is so not me. I'm out of the car screaming, like, come on, get out. You know what I mean? Like, it was just that moment where it was like, it's fine,
Yeah.
And that's a, little thing, but that's change, right? So like, it's all these things that started happening, and I'm grateful. I'm humbled. I'm humbled by who I was and who I am now. You know what I mean? That whole thing. I have ego, trust me. It comes out all the time. You know what I mean? I have character defects. They rear their ugly heads all the time. But I'm able to reel them in today, thank God. Sometimes it takes a minute. Sometimes I got to bang my head against the wall to figure out. We're like, dude, you're acting like an asshole. I'll never forget my ex-wife used to tell me, we'd argue, and she'd look at me and she'd go, I'm not going to stand here and argue with your disease.
Oh.
I know. Right?
Wow.
Yeah. What do you say to that?
I know.
Nothing. You're like, you're right. Shit.
Well, I think what a lot of your story portrays is, nothing changes if nothing changes, meaning referencing what we talked about in the beginning. You could take away the drugs, you could take away the alcohol. If you're not willing to change yourself on an internal level, nothing's gonna, your life is gonna still be the same. We call that dry drunks. I don't know what they call it in NA. Just dry, same thing.
Abstinent. It's just like you're not changing it. You're just not using. That's all.
And that's what like a lot of people they can put down, the drink, the drug, but you're bypassing the whole point of like this whole journey is about to it's supposed to improve your overall life.
Absolutely.
The substances is a lot of times people think, oh, what's my life going to be like without alcohol or without cocaine or crack or heroin or whatever the case is. And you can't wrap your head around it because you're so used to it. And it's, for a lot of people, it's fun, even though there's a ton of misery. It's enjoyable to a certain extent. So it's hard to grasp that.
I was hesitant to say it earlier. I bit my tongue for a second, but I'll say it now. For me, if my life didn't get better, I might as well be getting high.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I lived it both ways. I did. I lived it not using and staying abstinent. And I was miserable because I didn't change anything. Nothing changed. I still had the same thoughts and feelings. I didn't know how to change anything. But when I got clean this time and I made the changes and I did the work, that's what changed me. That's what made me different. That's what made me realize that, God, I need this. You know what I mean? I need those steps. I need the traditions. I need the people in NA or, I need the recovery people. Sometimes, like I see Ben all the time, and like, you know, I'm at the gym working out, and I'll just look over and I'll see somebody in recovery, and it'll just make me feel better. You know what I mean? Because I know that I'm not alone. You know what I mean? Even at 14 years, almost 14 years clean, you know, I still have those thoughts, those insecurities, those moments where I'm like, fuck, I'm the only person in this place. You know what I mean? And then I look over and I see Ben, and I see another guy, and I see another guy, and I see another guy, and I'm like, wait, I'm not alone. Any one of these guys I could grab if I'm going through something, and they'll take a moment and have a conversation. And there's so much security in that.
And you don't even have to be friends with them.
No.
That's the funny thing is we both go to LA Fitness. Yeah. I see Frank like 5 days a week. Yeah. He lives there. He never leaves. I'm surprised he came to the podcast.
I show up after you, so you're always there.
No, you show up before me and leave after me.
That's funny.
But anyway, where I was going with that is that over the course of time, even this past 2 weeks, I've met several people that I've seen at the gym for years and just randomly started talking to them. Like, because a lot of times I'll keep to myself somewhat, you know, if I know you, I'll say, I'll occasionally introduce myself to someone just and be friendly. Yeah. But I even met a couple people. I didn't realize they were in recovery, and I've seen them at the gym every day for 3 years.
Right.
You know, it's so crazy how many people out there are in the program.
Yeah.
If you just put yourself out there.
You know, usually when I have a conversation with somebody and they're like, I'm from New Jersey, I'm like, wow, what got you down to Florida? You know what I mean? And 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh, well, I'm in recovery. And I'm like, oh, you know, me too. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Especially if they vape. If they vape and they're from New Jersey.
They're blowing out a vape hit after they did their leg press
yeah.
workout, you know? But no, I mean, but there's such a good feeling in that too, when you know that you're never alone. You really aren't, you know? And like, I don't know, man. The last 2 years have been tough for me, and you know, the option to use was there. You know, it really was. It was a tough thing. You know, and the people in my life and the guys in my life today showed up. They showed up, and I would go to meetings, and I would be like, "This shit don't work." It's a funny story. I'll tell you this real quick. I went to this meeting, and I was showing my home group, right, 10 a.m. AMNA. At Bryant Park, if anybody wants to show up. But I went to this meeting, and I would be like, you know, God brought me this far and dropped me on my head. I'm like, absolutely he did. And this doesn't work. I thought that it worked, but it doesn't. You know, and I would share this, and they would let me do this. You know, and I'll never forget, it was like probably 3 weeks or 4 weeks into my situation, and I went to the meeting, and I shared some stupid shit. And this guy walked up. He had gotten a key tag, 90-day key tag. And I saw him. I watched him get the key tag. And I was talking to a guy who had 20-something years. And he was like, Frank, just keep showing up. You'll be okay. I promise you. You know, the one thing he did say is, you're still coming, right? And I'm like, yeah, because I want to bitch at everybody that this shit doesn't work. You know what I mean? And this kid walked up to me. I've never seen him before. And he grabbed me by my shirt, and he's like, you need to get back to the basics. And I'm like, I looked at this guy, and I was like, yeah, 12 years clean at the time. You know what I mean? Like, he just picked up 90 days. What are you talking? And he walked away. But again, he flicked a switch in me, and he was right. I'd never seen this kid again, ever. I've been looking for this kid for 2 years now. I can't find him. He got on a van and left, and I've never seen him again. But again, he flicked that switch, and it was like, you know what? You're right. I need to get back to the basics. And I started working steps again. You know what I mean? And it was like, I had to really like look at my part of everything that happened over the last 2 years for me. And once I did that, I was like, yeah, well, you know, I'm a self-sabotager through and through. You know what I mean? Even in recovery, when things go good, I learn how to throw a monkey wrench in everything. You know what I mean? And so, you know.
That brings up a good point I like to touch on. And because I say this when I run groups here, once in a while I'll remind our clients, like, you may quote unquote only have 30 days or 2 weeks or whatever. Quantity of time doesn't matter. It's quality of time. Every single person in this room has something to offer.
Absolutely.
And that goes to show you a guy with 90 days is inspiring a guy with 12 years and calling you out. Let's just say, call it what it is. He called me out.
Yep. I wasn't happy about it, but he did it. You know what I mean?
You know, you have regardless of the amount of clean time that you have your experience, and you can be useful to somebody else. And for me, watching our clients, watching my new sponsees go through this process, the thing that I take a step back to look at from perspective is the amount of courage that they have to do what they're doing in early recovery. I remember how hard it was, you know, when I had nothing. I didn't have a car, didn't have a place to live. You know, the simple things that I wanted, material-wise, they weren't there. You know, and I'm watching these people go through this process, and it's inspiring to see the amount of strength that they put forward.
Absolutely. I think you have to be the strongest at that point. I think, you know, I mean, you know, I think sometimes when we get multiple years clean, we forget how tough it really was in the beginning. You know what I mean? And to watch these guys come in and like, I didn't pick up my 6-month key tag because I was embarrassed. You know, I didn't pick up 3 months. You know, in NA we do 30 days, 60 days, you know, 90 days. We're very happy about our clean time in NA. You know what I mean? So, you know, like I didn't pick up any of those until I got my year, you know, because I was embarrassed. I just didn't want anybody to really kind of know, you know. And then I realized that, you know what, those key tags and those medallions, they're not for me. They're to show the newcomer that this thing really works and that, you know, like, look, you could get this if you put the work in, you know. And, you know, I've learned so much, man. And it humbles me to think about all the people we lost, you know, that just had to make a decision, you know, just had to make a decision to be like, you know what, I'm going to do this and I'm just going to give it a try. And, you know, I was a what they call an NA, like, you have to go by traditions. My first, you know, 5 years, I was like, oh my God, you can't do that. You can't talk about that. And now, you know, at 13 years, almost 14 years clean, I've understood that things have changed. You know what I mean? And you got to kind of go with the flow. Like my second sponsor was that guy. Sit in the first 3 rows, keep your fucking mouth shut. And if you want to know how to use, we'll call on you. Now, he was that guy, my second sponsor. You know what I mean? But I learned so much from him. You know what I mean? On a different, you know, level. My first sponsor was great. He was the most loving, caring person in the world. My second sponsor would hang up on me all the time. You know what I mean? You guys, I think, know him. He's in the industry. You know, he's around. But yeah, tough guy.
Tell us after.
Yeah, tough guy, great guy, loving guy, but no nonsense. Here's what I'm here to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm here to take you through the steps. That's it. You know, of course, you know, over the years we've become very, very close friends, but it wasn't about that in the beginning.
Well, I talk about that a lot. Ben knows, and I'm a firm believer in terms of sponsors and sponsee relationships. It's based off of taking somebody through the steps, and that's it. And you know, unfortunately, we've seen it, you know, in certain instances morph into more than that. Your marriage counselors, financial advisors, you know, all of the above, and it's unfair to both parties. I think, you know, that's what there's
married twice, divorced twice. I'm not a good marriage counselor. That's for sure.
Exactly. I mean, it's just, you know, there's therapists out there for a reason.
Absolutely.
You know, and what's that quote in the big book? Make use of doctors and psychologists. You know, so Frank, hey man, we're coming up on an hour.
Wow,
I can't even
that went
believe
fast.
it.
I love to hear myself talk, apparently.
Hey, it's all good, man. I'm glad you came on and you know, shared your story. And you know, because we don't have a lot of people on here that listen though, but for the average listener, they're not going to know the difference between AA and NA.
Right.
And for the listeners out there, you don't need to know the differences because they both really serve the same purpose. It's just, what do you prefer, you know?
Yeah, disclaimer, like, and I'm sure Frank will attest to this too, like AA, NA, like I personally don't care what program you choose. I tell our clients here, Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery, whatever, pick a fellowship, a program, and do it 100%. I'm a firm believer if you get yourself involved like Frank did with showing up to that same meeting, the people started to get to know them. You can do that in any fellowship, and then that fellowship has a program that goes with it. Follow that program. And
just dive in because, you know, like if you don't, I mean, you're not going to get what you're supposed to get out of this. You know, if you really dive in, and I think at 14 years, 13 years, I don't want to push I'm still at the tip of the iceberg here. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's so much more that I could learn and do, you know, and then you know how it goes, you know, you get multiple years clean, then all of a sudden the 5 meetings a week turn into 3, you know what I mean? And then they turn into 1. And then all of a sudden you're like, shit, I'm not feeling 1. You're back to 5. And then you're at 3 again. And then you're at 1. And then all of a sudden you haven't been to a meeting in 2 weeks. And you're like, shit, I need to go to a meeting. You know what I mean? And so I've gone through all that, you know what I mean? But the one thing I always know where to go back to when I'm feeling something or when I need something. And again, that security I have and looking around and knowing people are in recovery around me makes a huge difference for me.
Yeah.
You know?
That's awesome, man. Ben, any final thoughts?
I feel like we barely scratched the surface. I feel like we kind of touched on a lot of topics that we could definitely dive deeper into. I'd like to get you back, Frank.
I'd love to, man.
Yeah,
appreciate it. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. All right, that is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. If in the end you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always email us, Tom@realrecoverytalk.com and Ben@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.